Welcome to Mr. and Mrs. Wrestling.
I'm Steve.
And I'm Mare, and we're breaking down the world of pro wrestling.
From the eyes of a smart fan.
And a casual fan, and everyone in between.
Whether you're a lifelong fan
or just getting into it,
you've got a ringside seat with us.
All right, everybody, grab a drink, tighten up those knee pads, and hide your steel chairs because it's time for the Mr. and Mrs. Wrestling podcast.
I'm Mr. Wrestling.
And I'm Mrs. Wrestling.
And today, things are about to get a little chaotic, a little hardcore, and a lot all elite because AEW Revolution is right around the corner.
We're breaking down the biggest matches, the wildest predictions, the potential betrayals, and which wrestler might just wake up Sunday night wondering why they trusted their tag partner in the first place.
Wait, this isn't just Mr. and Mrs. today.
No, because when things get serious around here,
we activate triple threat mode. That's right. Joe is back in the house.
3 microphones, 3 opinions, and probably 3 completely different takes on who's walking out of Revolution with championship gold.
So today we're talking the Revolution card, the main event chaos,
the sleepers that might steal the show, and the AEW drama that only gets messier the closer we get to the pay-per-view.
So buckle up, wrestling fans, because this is the Mr. and Mrs. Wrestling podcast, and triple threat mode is officially activated.
Promotional consideration paid for by the following.
All right, guys, before we jump back into the show, I got to tell you about something that's near and dear to my heart, and that's looking like $1 million without spending $1 million.
If you're listening to the Mr. and Mrs. Wrestling podcast, you're already a top-tier wrestling fan. You care about the history, you care about the storytelling, you care about who really won that promo battle.
So why not dress like it?
Over at Pro Wrestling Tees, you can grab the official Mr. and Mrs. Wrestling merch. And buddy, this isn't some fly-by-night cheap print situation.
We're talking soft, comfortable tees.
Clean, bold designs.
The kind of shirt that works at a live show, a meetup, or your weekly pay-per-view watch party.
And here's the thing. When you rock the logo, you're not just wearing a shirt, you're repping the show. You're part of the conversation, and you're part of the community.
So do me a favor.
Right now, open up that browser.
Search Mr. and Mrs. Wrestling on Pro Wrestling Tees.
Grab the shirt. Maybe grab 2. One for you, one for the tag partner in your life.
Support the podcast, support the brand.
And look like you belong in the front row while you're doing it.
All right, let's get back to the show. Okay, guys, this will be the 7th annual Revolution, and it'll take place on Sunday, March 15th, 2026. At the Crypto.com Arena in Los Angeles, California, marking the 2nd consecutive year that Revolution will be hosted at the venue. So the card so far looks like we have a singles match, Swerve Strickland versus Brody King. How did this match come about, Joe? How did they ended up booking this? I didn't see.
Well, basically, they're trying to turn Swerve heel. Brody's been a monster babyface. He had those 2 matches with MJF, and he's been very over for a while. I mean, he had that tag team with Bandito for a while there. They're still kind of together, but Brody's kind of branched off right now and doing the singles thing. So it's a good match in terms of getting Swerve over as a heel, and then just kind of keeping Brody as that monster babyface. I mean, it's going to be interesting how they book it. I really think they're going to try to get Swerve. They want him to be a heel right now, so I think he's going to probably do something dastardly to get the win. So I think that's kind of where they're going with this. See what Steve thinks.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a total bloodbath. I could see Brody bleeding all over the place. Swerve's going to go all out. We might get a Swerve stomp through the announce table on the side. Someone getting hit, and Mare, your favorite thing, getting choked with a chain over the top rope to the outside.
Do not like.
Yeah, it's gonna be a good match. I still think Brody's gonna turn heel at some point with Buddy coming back. I would assume, hopefully soon. And I'm not sure how Buddy would fit in with Brody and Bandito, but I'd like to see Brody go heel and face Bandito for the Ring of Honor title. I think there would be money in that, especially, with the buildup at the new arena. I mean, the new studio sessions that they have in Jacksonville.
Yeah, you've been saying that for a while about Brody versus Bandito. That's a match I think you've been wanting to see for a bit here since, Brody's been kind of doing his own thing. I think it should be a great match. Size-wise, I feel like they're pretty comparable. Swerve might be a little bit smaller than Brody. Brody's a big guy, but I think it'll be hard hitting and
Swerve is huge now. He's
I mean
bulked up.
he's really bulked up a lot, but yeah, I think it'll be a fun match to watch. Chains and all, I guess. Then we have Andrade El Idolo versus Bandito. I don't know about you guys, but I've been loving the Spanish Peaky Blinders look he's got going on lately. Steve, talk to us about this match. What do you kind of foresee for it?
This match could steal the show. Andrade has been on a roll since coming back to AEW and working indies and New Japan. And Bandito last year, countless times he had great matches. Hechicero, the matches with Moxley, the matches with MJF, the matches with Takeshita. So I would imagine this to be nothing short of spectacular. And, Andrade's going to stay in that main event picture. Tony Khan likes him. He's doing great work. He looks the best he's ever been. And yeah, this should be a fantastic match.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely the sleeper match on the card. When you look at the big matches on the card and then you see this one, you're like, you know what, this one could potentially steal the show, depending on how much time they're given and the parameters that they're given. But yeah, I think both guys are great. Like we talked about here, and just you kind of reiterated, like Andrade's on he's on a roll right now. So this could be really really fun to watch, and I hope they're given enough time to have a solid match.
Yeah, I expect Andrade to go over here. And, if they're going to do something around WrestleMania weekend, Andrade Bandito 2 for the Ring of Honor title, that's where Bandito can get his win back. But I think that would be a great setup.
Is Bandito one of the Ring of Honor champs right now?
Yeah, he's the world champ.
Okay. All right. Well, good for him. So that would be a kind of a way to get Andrade the belt, without, giving him one of the AEW ones, which he would do good as one of the champs. I think that would be awesome. Okay. Then we are going to have the AEW World Trios title match. So the Don Callis family, that would be Kazuchika Okada, Kyle Fletcher, and Mark Davis versus Jet Speed. So Kevin Knight and Mike Bailey with Mystico. Joe, how do you feel about this match? What do you think's going to happen here?
I think it could go either way, to be honest with you. Them throwing Mystico in there kind of changes the dynamic of the match. Obviously Hangman's, got other issues to tend to. I think honestly it could go either way. I mean, I think regardless, it's going to be a great match. All those guys are fantastic. The match on Dynamite was great. They had MJF, KO, Hangman on the outside, and then poor Kevin Knight got pinned for the second time in the same night in a championship match. But yeah, I think this could go either way because, Fletcher and Okada are already singles champions. Davis is kind of the bruiser of the group right now. So either way they go, I'm good with. So that's kind of where I'm at with it.
Yeah, Okada and Fletcher, neither of them are taking a loss by any means. I expect the Don Callis family to win this and keep it rolling. And the only thing that I could see happening is maybe if it's later in the card and Okada plays a role in the Takeshita match, maybe that comes into play here. But I think it'll be a fantastic match. Mystico's going to be over like crazy here, and Kyle Fletcher always has fantastic matches. So I think this should be another spectacular match. It's probably, this whole card's probably going to be a total 6-hour show with the pre-show. So it's going to be a huge show.
I love a long show. All right. Then we're going to have an AEW World Tag Team title match, FTR versus the Young Bucks. Now, they did have like a heated debate this week on Dynamite, right? They had a back and forth with Renee in a conference room, and I think I'm really excited for this match. It's been a while, I feel like. I mean, that was the big feud and being the elite for a while when FTR was still with WWE, and the Young Bucks were like saying "fuck the revival," and then finally they were able to get together in AEW. But I think this will be an exciting match. Steve, why don't you break it down for us?
Yeah, this continues this long-standing rivalry that's gone on for the better part of a decade now. And, I know both these teams are going to go all out. Again, I expect another fantastic match. And I know that a lot of people are tired of, maybe seeing this feud, but I think these guys are probably going to think of an innovative way to make it different, make it impactful. And I don't see a title change here. I expect FTR to win, and maybe we see the return of Cope and Christian to maybe save the Young Bucks from an attack after the match. But yeah, I expect this to be another very good tag team match.
Yeah, I'm with Steve. I think they retain here, and we're definitely overdue. I think we've been talking about Cope and Christian here for months, coming back. So I think this could be the time, you know, to slot them back into the fold here. And obviously they're not getting any younger. So, especially I think Cope talked about this being his last year, I believe. And, Christian, he's had a lot of injuries in his career. So this is the time to do it, build toward Wembley, get that big last kind of match for them, to kind of cap their careers off here as at least as a tag team. If Edge leaves and Christian stays, which could happen, good for them, but I for each of them. But I think as a tag team, this is where you kind of want to build, to that big moment. So I think I'm with Steve though. I think FTR retains, and then we could see Edge and Christian, Cope and Christian, return here.
Okay, guys, you guys can both weigh in on this, but who would you rather see at Double or Nothing or Wembley? FTR versus Edge and Christian, or Edge and Christian versus the Young Bucks? Which match would you most like to see? Joe, you start.
I mean, me personally, since I'll be watching both probably, if not live, definitely on tape delay, but I would rather see probably FTR against Edge and Christian at Wembley. I think that's your fresher match. We've seen the Young Bucks and FTR, a lot, which I'm okay with. But I think in terms of the bigger draw internationally, I think it's you got to put Edge and Christian on that match with FTR. I think that gets more eyes, probably a little bit more excitement, as long as they don't do it before then. If they do it before then, you kind of ruin the luster. But I think I would build toward that. I think that gets a little bit more excitement out of your fans because it's definitely the fresher match.
What about you, Steve?
So it's going to go one of two ways, I would think. So if the Young Bucks win, I could see at Double or Nothing the Young Bucks versus Cope and Christian, and then Cope and Christian winning the titles there, and then going to Wembley and fighting FTR. And if FTR win, I could see FTR and Cope and Christian at Double or Nothing, and then Cope and Christian versus the Young Bucks at Wembley. Either way, I think it's set up for two really good tag team matches. And, selfishly, I'd love to see, since we're going to Double or Nothing and we're going to be there, in New York, I'd want to see Cope and Christian versus the Young Bucks. I think that would be something special. Two of the greatest tag teams of all time, and it would be something really memorable.
I also think that it would be great just in terms of like the skill level of the Young Bucks. Like these are two older guys coming off of injuries, and like the Young Bucks would be able to put on a match with them and help kind of carry them in a way that still makes them look good and make it look like they're doing all of their own work. You know what I mean? Like I feel like the Young Bucks are good at stuff like that. They're good at carrying a match in a way that still makes their opponent look, you know.
Yeah, we're going to talk about it later, Joe. Look at what they did with Sting in his final match. Not
Yeah.
to spoil that, but yeah, they would be able to pull out something fantastic. That's why either way, in either direction that you go, it's going to look great.
Then we're going to have an AEW Continental title no time limit match with Mox and Takeshita. That's going to be an exciting match. Steven, you want to talk about it?
Yeah, it's going to be a rematch from the Continental Classic, and I think this is another one that's going to, potentially steal the show. Takeshita, now the New Japan Television Champion, going against Mox for the Continental title. No time limit, so they're going to go all out. Mox is going to give everything he has. Normally in these Continental matches, there's no, shenanigans and, nobody getting involved. But I definitely see Moxley retaining this, and they're going to keep building to that Takeshita Okada match, which again I think could be set up at Double or Nothing.
Yeah, this is going to be great. If it wasn't, I'd be shocked. I do feel like the no time limit is gonna drag it out a little bit, which, it could not. I mean, we have seen it in the past, some of these no time limit matches as they're announced and they go 18. So, I'm kinda hoping they keep it around 18 to 25 would be nice, just because there's so many matches that need a lot of time on this show, but I do think Moxley retains, and I'm with Steve. I think, they're gonna build to that Okada match. It's gonna happen. It's gotta happen soon. They've been, slow, teasing that match for months now, so it's gotta happen this summer, I think.
Then we have the AEW Women's World Title Best 2 out of 3 Falls match, Tekla versus Chris Statlander. This would be kind of like the rematch, right? Since Tekla won the title.
Yeah.
Joe, what do you think?
I'm not a big fan, as you guys all know, and anyone that listens to this on a regular basis of, flipping belts, the main belts, very quickly unless there's significant reasons. So I mean, I would expect Tekla to win here, maybe with some help, from Julia and Sky Blue. That's kind of where I'm at. I think it's too quick to pull the belt off of her. Kind of, it's. I was kind of shocked when she won, so why not establish her for a little bit here? Give her a little bit of a run. You can pull the belt off of her, in May or at Wembley. So, I think she should retain. I think the match should be great. I mean, both these girls can go. I don't want to see a promo battle from either one of them, but both girls are good in the ring, so I'm thinking it's going to be a good match.
Yeah, I've enjoyed Tekla as the women's champion. I've enjoyed her promos. I thought she was solid. I definitely think she's going to retain, and definitely could see the Sisters of Sin getting involved, but I don't see Tekla losing until maybe Wembley, maybe a big Dynamite, but I would imagine that's going to be Tony getting involved there. But yeah, this should be a decent match. Statlander for me is 50-50. She either has a fantastic match or things just don't seem to click. Her new darker image, could she be, going heel or getting frustrated? Something to keep your eye on, but this should be a great match.
Do you think that Thunder Rose is going to play any part in this match since her and Chris Statlander are kind of like buds right now?
Yeah, she could. She's had a feud and she's been going back and forth with, the Sisters of Sin and Tekla. She had a match with. So yeah, she could get involved. I think Thunder's better suited for something like Ring of Honor. I think she could be, a player over there. Like her and Athena going into a long term feud, or her and Diana going into a feud. I think something like that would be, better suited for Thunder. She has that long standing name, unless we're bringing Britt Baker back, because then, her and Thunder throw it right back on.
Yeah, that'd
Yeah,
be great.
I agree, Steve. I mean, she's kind of cold right now. After that big feud with Britt a few years ago, and then she got hurt and she was gone for a while. She never actually kind of got back to that top tier echelon of females in AEW. So yeah, that could be a good fresher up for her in Ring of Honor.
Give her some time. Get the ring rust off. Then we have the Piece of Resistance, the AEW World Title Texas Death Match, MJF versus Adam Page. This is going to be a bloodbath. Like, there's going to be so much blood. It's going to be a shit show. Steve, what do you think's going to happen in this match, or what do you hope would happen?
I'd like to see MJF keep the title until Will Ospreay's ready, but the stipulation that Adam Page is going to do the Cody Rhodes, never challenge for the world title again. I'm always skeptical of that, but the one time they did it before, and Mayor, we were there in person to watch that match. We've seen somebody not get the world title and never get another shot at it again. So it could be something for Paige, but I expect Paige to win the title as much as I love MJF as the traveling world champion. We'll see here, but this should be match of the night right here. These guys are going to go all out. They're both going to bleed. There's going to be staples involved. There's going to be thumbtacks. There's going to be the dynamite ring. Everything's going to come into play, and I expect it to go, close to 30 minutes, if not longer.
Yeah, I almost wonder, and I agree with everything you said there, Steve. The finish of the trios title match on Wednesday, did they foreshadow how Hangman wins the belt, or he gets the ring from MJF and knocks him out with it? I'm just, I was thinking about that. I'm like, that could just be like just that the foreshadowing of the storytelling that they love to do in AEW. I do think Hangman walks out with the belt. I wouldn't be shocked to see a lot of outside interference. I wouldn't even be shocked to see the some of the elite guys getting in the mix there if MJF does his thing where he hires people to protect him, which we've seen in the past. And he's no stranger to violence. I mean, if y'all remember that dog collar match he had at Revolution with CM Punk, years ago. So, he can definitely, get down and dirty, you know, on the hardcore side of pro wrestling. So I think it's going to be a great match. I expect violence, like Steve said, and I do think Hanger's going to walk out with the belt again.
Yeah, if Hangman wins, it could instantly transition into another Hangman Swerve program. And
Yes.
if he does win, I could see him going and running into Kyle Fletcher and Kyle Fletcher being the world champion going into Wembley and Fletcher Osprey. It
Yeah.
kind of circles back to Osprey and Okada when Osprey was transitioning to heavyweight and he could never get past Okada. He could never get past him. That was his big brother. And the same thing could be for Fletcher. He loses to Osprey and, it absolutely drives him crazy. And then, he goes way too far and finally dethrones Osprey. So I could see that being some long-term storytelling right there for the world title.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, like when AEW first started, I mean, one of the things that Tony Khan and the Bucks and Kenny and those guys talked about, and Cody back then, obviously, is they wanted their big programs to be years long. So who knows? Like I know the Elite story was kind of put out there, like, hey, we have this 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 10-year story that we're going to tell before we are and just become backstage guys, but who knows how long that Hangman and Swerve and Tony Khan have been planning this feud. They could have been planning this for years too. So it's just not as well known because it wasn't put out there in the public. So this could be something that goes on for another 5 years. You don't know. So, but I'm looking forward to it.
All right, guys. So, do you think that there's anything going on for the women's tag team titles for Revolution or anything with like the TBS title? Could we see Darby? Could we see David Finlay?
Show. I mean, you could put one or two on, the 0 hour. I wouldn't add anything to the main show. This is going to be a long show. They have matches that need to tell stories that have to go long. I mean, I would utilize the pre-show, and put one or two on there if need be. I wouldn't put a Darby match on the pre-show by any means. I think he's a draw. Same with I wouldn't put Finley on there as his debut on the pre-show, but you could definitely do a TBS title, a quick little 10-minute, something. You could pull someone up from Ring of Honor, or some, mid-level to go for that belt. But I wouldn't put Darby and Finley on the pre-show. That's just my personal opinion, though.
You could do something like a Clark Connors and like a Jay Lethal, something like that, because they did announce that the pre-show is going to be streaming for free on HBO Max, so they could get a decent amount of views for that. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe they look at Willow and Harley versus Alex Windsor and Jamie Hayter.
That'd be good. Yeah.
The
We could see
birds?
the Brawling Birds. I think we could get new tag team champions there. I would like to see, something. They could do like a CMLL triple threat because if Mystico's coming, maybe they get Dorada and throw him in there with, maybe Briscoe. I thought Champa was going to be in the TNT title mix, but he just lost to Daniel Garcia on Collision tonight, so I don't think he's going to be in there. But I hope they do something with Finley. I really like the dogs, and I think Gabe Kidd is a stud, and I'd like to see him and Kenny run it back for sure. And could we see Kenny Omega make an appearance here? I know there was a lot of talk of him trying to get out of his Japanese deal, and we know Tony Khan has a jet, and he's never been afraid to fuel it up and fly somebody. So, Japan to Tokyo is not too bad. So Tony could definitely make it happen.
Yeah, I haven't heard an update on that. The last I heard was that's why he wasn't booked because they just weren't sure if he was going to be able to get out of that commitment. But yeah, we could see him pop up. You never know.
Oh, Kenny Omega. Okay, so you guys did your top 3 Revolution matches of all time. It looks like you agreed on 2 out of the 3 matches, and there was one match that was different between the 2 of you. We can go ahead and talk about the couple that you agreed on first. You guys both picked the AEW World Tag Team title match from 20's Revolution. That was Adam Page and Kenny Omega versus the Young Bucks, and it was 30 minutes and 6 seconds. Looks like Hangman and Kenny Omega picked up the win. Now, was this the time period when they were like buddies and Hangman was drinking all the time, like drinking the fans' beer and stuff? That was such a fun time in wrestling. Steve, why is this in your top 3 matches?
Yeah, so I think this is the greatest tag team match of all time. We watched it live. Even Dave Meltzer gave it 6 stars. Age Match has it as a 9.68, and I absolutely loved it. Kenny was fantastic and was just coming into his own. The Young Bucks were, top of their game, and this was the first time, seeing Hangman and Kenny like really go all out as a team, and they sure did go all out. They gave them 30 minutes, and this was year 2 of AEW, so this was a huge feud because Kenny hadn't been world champion yet. And, we thought, is Hangman and Kenny really going to be a long term tag team? And this solidified them as one of the best tag teams in AEW history. And it was just fantastic.
Yeah, no doubt. Excuse me. The match was just in terms of storytelling. They included, you know, the they were kind of all feuding essentially amongst themselves. The elite at that time. No one really was kind of a full out heel yet, but they were kind of teasing actually all 4 of them at times to turn heel. And they obviously turned on each other during the match, and then we got that spectacular performance from both teams. But yeah, I mean, in terms of just actual in ring storytelling, big bumps. The Young Bucks, like Steve said earlier, they're probably one of the greatest, minds between the 2 of them in terms of putting matches together to integrate story and to integrate action. And I know that they're not the type, they don't put the entire match together before, they put their big spots in there. And if you watch closely enough, they're communicating with the other teams and the referees, and referees getting signals over to the other teams. But they're so good at calling matches and putting matches together. They're probably, I mean, in all honesty, probably one of the best. I'd put them up there with, Ric Flair, Ricky Steamboat. You know, those 2 guys were some of the best of all time to just call matches from the ring. So hats off to them. Hats off to Hangman and Kenny. They, like Steve said, they put together one of the greatest matches, if not the greatest tag team match in wrestling history.
Yeah, Nick Jackson is a monster. I think he's so good. To me, he's this generation's, to me, Barry Windham, because he
Yeah.
can do everything. I'm dying to have one Nick Jackson singles run, even if it's just for like the TNT title, or the Ring of Honor World title, something. But I'd like to see him just go on a run. Maybe one year he gets to be in the Continental Classic. I think that would be something fun to see because I think he's hugely underrated, and he's looked at as a tag team guy, almost like how Barry Windham was early in his career, how
Yep.
beautiful Bobby was throughout his career. But I think he could really hold his own as a singles.
If you look at the Young Bucks, anybody that's been watching them for any length of time, like you and I have, Matt Jackson takes about 95% of the losses. Nick, I mean, I can only recall maybe seeing him, get pinned or submitted a handful of times in their whole career since they've been prevalent. Obviously before they were doing just random indies and stuff. I'm sure stuff we hadn't seen before. But I almost wonder if Matt has done that to protect Nick, because if Nick becomes a single, and Matt's older, Matt could retire and Nick could go on a 5-year run. So
Yeah.
that could be something that they build to down the line, where either they do a breakup angle, or Matt retires and Nick's like, I'm going to go out, and they could tie all that into that. So I mean,
Oh
that
my
could be so cool.
God.
Yeah.
Jeez, that kid just came in and scared the crap out of me. She brought me a picture of us eating hot dogs. These kids.
But yeah, I'm with Steve. I
Sorry.
mean, that's all right. You had that. What was that? The couple years ago, Steve. Was that Nick and was that Phoenix or Penta? He wrestled 1-on-1.
Phoenix.
Phoenix, yeah, and that was just a freaking incredible match. So I mean, I'm with you, Steve. I think Nick Jackson needs a singles run, 100%. I'm all for it.
Do you think we'd ever get like a brother versus brother feud like the Usos? I mean, I'm sure other people. Oh, Owen and Bret Hart.
It could
I think
happen. Yeah, why not?
it would be crazy because they both have the most like ruthless looking faces when they're being heels. You know, like they got
I
that
think
RBF.
if Matt retired first, he would wanna go out against his brother,
Yeah, for sure. I'm with
and
you
they
there.
would
Yeah, it'd be epic.
Tony would make that the main event.
Oh yeah, no doubt about it.
I'd wanna see Jim Cornette on commentary.
Oh my God, you fuck Knuckles. All right, you guys, your second match that you both picked was the AEW Women's World Title Hollywood Ending match, but with Toni Storm versus Mariah May in 12 minutes and 56 seconds. This was in 2025. Toni Storm picks up the win here. Joe, why did this make it in your top 3 of Revolution matches?
This is one of the best stories ever told in AEW. Mariah May went from nothing essentially and then became Tony's sidekick. Yeah, I shouldn't say nothing. She was, competing over in Japan, but most of the North American fans didn't know who she was. And then she's Tony Storm's sidekick, and then they do the heel turn and they do the build, and Mariah at that time as champion, like we talked about before here, she was probably the most over female in the world at that time. I mean, she was on top of everything in terms of business and popularity, having good matches, and they did I think they kind of, it was kind of technically almost like a Taipei death match, if I recall, because they had the glass and the tape fists, and those girls bled a lot. I remember I saw Aubrey Edwards, who refereed that match. She had said in an interview, like, they bled so much during that match that like the smell of iron like made her sick, and the people at like ringside were just like, you could just smell the iron from the blood. So the story that they told was from beginning to end was just incredible. I mean, it's a shame what happened to Mariah now Blake, the way she's being used and when she left, but up until that point, I mean, you couldn't really get much better in terms of women at that point. I'll let Steve take over.
Yeah, I thought this was the best women's match of all time. Yeah, Cage Match gave it a 9.51. Meltzer gave it 5 stars. It was a total death match. These women went all out. They were bleeding all over the place. I remember watching this and wondering, how could they follow this? And I couldn't understand why, someone like Mariah was leaving. Yeah, I get WWE's your dream, but Mayor, it's the same thing I always say to you. Like when these people jump to WWE, it's like there's only so many top spots. And look at the pecking order. Where are you really going? And Mariah May is great. She's not great as Blake Monroe. It's been a total, letdown there. But they're not booking her over Liv Morgan. They're not booking her over Stephanie. They're not booking her over Lash Legend, Rhea Ripley, Io Sky, Asuka. So that leaves you, at best, you're looking at, Chelsea Green status if you get there. And who knows how long she'll be in NXT. Ethan Page has been there for 3 years, and he's been doing great things, but her stuff ever since she had that botched loss to Thea Hale for the North American title, it feels like everything's just gone off the rails. And it's funny because that's what Tony said in one of her final promos for this match is that, she, is going to be destined for mediocrity now. And that's exactly what she's doing.
Yeah, it's a
Tony.
shame too. She's such a good talent. I mean, it's just one of those things where you make the decision and sometimes it doesn't go well. And that's kind of where she's at right now. Like Steve said, she went from the number one female in the world to NXT. So
Yeah, and now
And just
probably a
and
lot of
just
people
imagine.
probably know her still, in NXT. Like, I mean, I don't think even the casual WWE fan watches NXT because, I mean, it's not as big of a show, but that's just my opinion.
And you'll never see a match like that on WWE.
Never.
And just imagine Mariah May Tony Storm and Mina as the timeless love trio. That would be
Yeah,
great.
no doubt about it.
Tony and Mariah were great, adversaries, and they'd be great, partnered up again. It'd be like the Mega Powers.
Yeah, I agree.
Macho Man and Hulk Hogan. All right. So the next match, Steve, that you picked, your third and final match, was the dog collar match between CM Punk and MJF in 2022. That match was 26 minutes and 48 seconds. CM Punk picks up the win then. Meltzer gave it 4 3/4 stars, it looks like. I did watch some highlight reels of it. I'm sure I watched it when it happened as well, but that was a bloodbath. I saw all that blood and I was like, I think I've seen enough. But why did you pick this as your third match?
This was in the middle of the CM Punk run in AEW. He came out to, AFI, looked like he was in Ring of Honor. It was huge. His feud with MJF was a fantastic feud. I feel like at the end of this feud is when it started to go off the rails for CM Punk here. And it's a shame because there was so much left on the table that we didn't get and will never get again. But, it was a fantastic match. It really, I think it took MJF to another level. He upped his game after that and, really took the mantle for AEW because shortly after, a few months after this is, when we lost Omega and the Bucks for a while and they, started to go down the trios route and it was MJF and Adam Cole that were picking up the ball and they ran with it. And, this really prepared MJF to really swim in the deep end. Everybody thought it was Chris Jericho, but I think the feud with Punk really took MJF to that next level.
Yeah, I mean, this match showed that MJF could take a beating. He could give a beating. I think overall, like Steve said, it prepared him for kind of being the guy, because all that happened so fast, with Punk and Kenny and the Bucks and all that. And, Punk gets fired, Bucks and Kenny get suspended, and then all of a sudden it's like Steve said, it's literally, MJF and Cole are the top guys, for a while there. Hangman was kind of in between, right? His kind of top guy status and, mid card status at that point. He was kind of floating in between, So yeah, this match, I mean, just in terms of a booking standpoint, was fantastic. Those guys told a great story. They beat the hell out of each other, Punk, I will say this, and he still is. He's all about putting the younger guys, the younger generation that he feels is ready. He's all about putting them over. He obviously had more of a say in AEW while he was there. WWE is a different animal altogether, but he is in that upper echelon, of WWE with Cody and Roman and them. So, he does have more of a say, but he's always been about putting over, the next generation and getting them ready to kind of carry the ball going into the next decade.
And then, Joe, your final match was the AEW World Tag Team Title Tornado match. This was Darby Allin and Sting versus the Young Bucks. It was 21 minutes and 3 seconds. It looks like Meltzer gave it 4 3/4 stars, and Darby Allin and Sting won. Was this Sting's final match? You
Yeah.
guys were there together.
We were. Yeah, I got the Sting final match shirt on right now, so yeah.
So, Joe, why is this your third and final match?
For me, I think it was nostalgia. I mean, when you look at the Revolution cards over the history, there were probably a lot of matches wrestled better or, things that were maybe done a little bit better. But this was, for me, nostalgia. The story, I mean, the story was awesome. I mean, like we talked about the Bucks, what they did for Sting. And then, you have Darby Allin taking that insane bump from, a 20, 30-foot ladder onto the glass out to the outside on top of the chairs. I mean, you had Sting's kids in there, the tribute video, Ricky Steamboat, Ric Flair, getting involved in the match. You had Lex Luger at ringside. I mean, Jim Ross is calling the match. It was, to me, it was just kind of the whole story involved, the nostalgia involved. It's his last match. There were probably 2 or 3 matches on that card that were better, in ring wise. But when you put the whole thing together, for me, I think it was just all those things and being there live, experiencing it. It was really, really cool thing to see and witness live. And I think they were right by putting Sting over that night. He should have went over. And Darby, I love that guy. I just hope he lives to see.
Yeah, it was a fantastic match. If we did top 5, this would have been number 5 for me. Number 4 would have been
Glitchin'
Fletcher
Babe.
versus Osprey, the steel cage in 2025. But this was a fantastic match. I took our son Rocco. He was 7 at the time, and you know this was the match of the night for him. They came out to Seek and Destroy by Metallica. His kids dressed up as older versions of Sting. They got involved in the match. It started his oldest son as being a pro wrestler now, as he does dark matches for Ring of Honor and is getting trained by Jay Lethal. So, yeah, this match was awesome. The Young Bucks doing what the Young Bucks do, have great matches. Darby went all out, this generation's Mick Foley. And, it was a great send off for Sting. 1,000 people were in Greensboro that night. It was an awesome time. That was also Will Ospreay's AEW in ring debut. So, that was a fantastic card. And, I think there's going to be, more great things to come for the Young Bucks. I know we'll see Sting again, and I'm excited to go to Double or Nothing. I think that's going to be great in New York City. So a lot of good things coming for AEW.
Agreed.
I think we have a few honorable mention matches too. I was doing a little bit of research. MJF, he had a 60-minute Iron Man match with Bryan Danielson in 2023. Do you guys remember that match?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a fantastic match.
I'm
Great
surprised
match.
it didn't make it to your top 3, babe, because you're such a Bryan Danielson fan.
Yeah, he's had a lot of great matches, but I think those 3 are the top of the top.
Yeah. There was another one too, Will Ospreay versus Kyle Fletcher in 2024 was a great match. Eddie Kingston versus Jericho in 2022 was a good match. I mean, there's just a ton of matches. But yeah, I mean, that's our podcast. You guys have any closing thoughts? Anything you want to talk about?
Yeah, make sure you guys like, follow, subscribe, check us out on X. I'll always be live tweeting. You can follow us on Instagram, Facebook. Make sure you download, tell your friends, tell your family. Pro Wrestling Tees. Make sure you guys check out the merch. We're going to be in Queens for Double or Nothing. So we'll be there passing out some stuff. We're going to be doing reviews of this show. We got Mount Rushmore episode coming up, and, we're on the road to WrestleMania. We'll get into a lot of big things coming up in pro wrestling.
Yeah, I'm with Steve there. Like and subscribe. Give a follow on socials. Keep following pro wrestling. Support your local independents, like we used to always say back in the day. So just keep watching and interacting, and we'll see you guys next time.
Okay, serious question. How do people let everyone know they're listening to the hottest wrestling podcast in the game?
That's easy. They stop yelling it at strangers in Target and they go to Pro Wrestling Tees.
Boom. See? Growth, maturity, merch?
That's right. The official Mr. and Mrs. Wrestling podcast shirts are live. Fresh designs, soft tees, drip approved.
Perfect for WrestleMania watch parties.
Perfect for AEW, WWE, TNA, and even New Japan Pro Wrestling pay-per-views.
Perfect for when you're cutting a promo in your living room.
Or when you're reminding your spouse you were right about that heel turn.
I was right.
Debatable.
What's not debatable? You need this shirt.
Head over to Pro Wrestling Tees and grab yours now.
Support the podcast.
Rep the brand.
And join the Mr. and Mrs. Wrestling family.